your camera's following the ball, so he's not
It's
fully
kind of a
centered.
reverse compliment. Like you started giving me props about my shot, and then turns out it's just a filter.
No. I'm talking about the composition now. The filter's good. No, but you didn't like it. I liked it. All right. I just told everybody how much I like a
Shot's all
misfilter.
right, but the filter.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Game Day Glare. I'm Lance, and I'm with my boy E. How you doing, E?
Great. Yourself?
Good. So today's topic is cinematic techniques.
Yes.
Now, it's not easy making cinematic shots. So I don't know. We're going to try our best to tackle this because in sports videography, you're not thinking cinematic, right? You're thinking action-packed, fast-paced. So it's tricky to know when to do those cinematic shots. So what would you say qualifies as a cinematic shot?
Whatever looks like a blockbuster summer explosion type movie scene. No, but I think anything that looks sorry. I was gonna use the word dramatic in a sense that just feels right. Like just feels like there's a lot of effort, whether it's the framing, the look, the style, all these things. Just giving it a bit of a, I don't know how to put it in words, to be honest. Like, especially on the podcast, I can't show what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I think it's just having a bit more thought about what you want your shot to look like, and not just filming whatever's happening in front of you. It's actually thinking of all the of thinking about the audio, thinking about the framing, the composition, the lighting, all these things, and making all these things as perfect as possible. I think the result of that is going to look way more cinematic than just filming for the sake of filming. But in saying that, yeah, there's a technique and there's things that you need to hit if you want to get to that. And that, I think that's basically those techniques and those tips that we're discussing today. Am I right?
Yeah, you're right.
Cool. So I prepared accordingly. So that's good.
There you go. I feel like cinematic shots are story enhancers. They help give you more emotion, more feeling. You kind of can play out that scene a little bit. They're more planned because while we're filming sports, the majority of thing is us as videographers is reacting to the action that's happening on the playing field. Where when you want to do a cinematic shot, you're actually trying to tell that story a little bit better. Yes, you can have a play that you could slow down and it could look cinematic, but you're not always planning those plays. To try and get a real cinematic shot, you really have to think of what the purpose of this shot is. Why am I doing this shot? How I'm going to express the emotion of this shot in my video. That's how I look at it. But it is hard to put it in words, right? Because in sports, it's so fast. So like when you go through Instagram, and sometimes I'll see people put some cinematic, say, football shots. It catches your eye and it makes a big difference because all of a sudden you're not used to that. It's a good change of pace. It seems a bit slower. The composition is a little bit better. The lighting is a little bit better. So that's what the idea of today's topic is try to help our audience get those cinematic shots and figure out when's the right time to use them. Because I've used cinematic shots wrong in my career where like I tried to slow down the pace of a story and I thought showing a cinematic shot would be that element. And later on, when I look back at those edits, it wasn't the right time. So timing is a big part too of when to use those cinematic shots. And
that makes sense.
Why would you use a cinematic shot in a sports reel, E?
I'd say to tell the story, like you said, like it's a story enhancer. So like to make it more into a story, into a short film, into something that feels like a complete package and not just like a sequence of nice highlights. Yeah, that for me would be the purpose. Also just make it look more expensive. Make it look like high quality production.
That's it. You want your cinematic shots to be crisp. You want them properly exposed. When you color correct, you want to have the right color on them, because you're trying to give off that emotion, trying to give off that sense that this is an important shot. I plan this shot. And that's the idea of cinematic, at least in sports. I always felt like some of the cinematic shots that I plan are establishing shots, venue shots. Like I feel like those are very, very important when telling a story. Just location, and that's where I usually start, is planning out, okay, how I'm going to show this venue, because I have time, right? Like when you have players in front of you, sometimes you don't have a lot of time. You know what it's like when you work in pro
Yeah.
sports. You got this guy for 3 minutes, get your headshots, get him to do whatever actions you want. But when you're filming, like from the parking lot, the venue outside, you have a couple takes. So that's when you kind of try different movements and that, and then it really allows you to capture the venue, but also give you a cinematic shot at the same time. You have more time, and that's how I feel.
Yeah, you can add some movement with like a gimbal or something. There's tons of things you finally have time to do. So should we get into the like the what settings do you need to use to get those shots?
Slow motion.
Yes.
No, honestly, yeah. Okay, let's go into the settings. I'll let you take a stab at it first.
Well, first of all, I think you need your timeline to be in 24p, like in 25 if you're in PAL, but because that's like cinema. Basically, the higher the frame rate, and I'm talking about your timeline. I'm talking about your export frame rate. I'm not talking about when you're filming. Um, that frame rate, the higher it is, let's say it's 60, it's gonna look like super vivid, super lifelike. It's gonna be like on television. That's how you see like sitcoms and stuff. Like it looks like much more like true. Where if you go to like a much lower frame rate, which is like the lowest you can go for the human eye to watch before it gets weird is 23, and that's what movies are shot in, and well 23.976, and which is 24. But basically,
It's pretty close. It's pretty close.
yeah. So that's cinematic in a sense that like yeah, that's when you see that texture that looks that's what in comparison, like on television, like a sitcom would be in 60, where a movie or a drama series would be in 24, and you can definitely see like a difference in the look. So if you want to do something cinematic, then I would definitely use a 24 frames per second timeline and export. Other than that, as far as filming goes, you can film in 60 or 120 or 24. Like it doesn't really matter. But if you want to have cool slow motion action, then yeah, 60 or 120 would be ideal. But if you're filming something that doesn't need to be slowed down, I would film it in 24 frames, because that's how you're gonna get the best quality out of it, the best look, and the perfect motion blur as well. So then it's all about, to me it's all about like settings wise, like we can talk about composition and things like that after, and sound design and all these things. But as far as settings go, it's really about making sure you nail your exposure, because it's if you're underexposed, overexposed, all these things, like it's just, and if your colors are off, then it's kind of killing the whole thing. Like of course, if you can manage to save it in post, if you're off by not too much, should be fine. But it's really about nailing your exposure, and having like a perfect shot that looks like amazing and beautiful, and all that, like you were saying at the start. So if and all that starts with a properly exposed shot, I think.
You want the cleanest image as possible for your cinematic shots. And honestly, your shutter speed is major. It plays a major key in this. You want the right motion blur. If your shutter speed's too high, it's going to look weird. It's going to look too crisply, like so you only double your shutter speed to your frame rate. So, and 24 is perfect. So I have a 1/50 as my shutter when I'm shooting 24 frames. And honestly, that is the best setting for cinematic. Now, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said your exposure. Like you want to make sure you have the right exposure and the right white balance. You know, you want that image to come out of your camera perfect as you can. Like obviously, you know, we would shoot it in S-Log 3 and color correct it after, well, add our look to it after. But you're not going to want to tweak that image too much. You want your white balance to be pretty much spot on. You don't want to have to adjust anything really because you want it as clean, and as less grain as possible.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Now we don't
But
always do that, but that's what we want to do. Because
exactly.
no, because sometimes you're stuck, right? Where the lighting isn't ideal, and you do have to maybe play with your exposure a bit. Uh, depending on what light's coming from the background, it's how to use that available light and make it look cinematic. Like you can have a light coming in, like so sunlight. Say you're doing sunlight at a football game and it's in the background. Well, then you can make a cinematic shot with the sun glares and the players and all that too. So that's where shots like that come into effect, where you're not filming the action, you're filming the atmosphere. And that's giving you that different perspective and that different cinematic look for your highlight that's going to make you stand out. So use what's around you and figure out what's going to be nice. Now, it's going to be trial and error too. You can't plan out every shot. You could be filming a kickoff and all of a sudden the sun, as you get closer to September, the sun goes down sooner and faster. So you might only have, say if it's a 7 o'clock game, well, you might only have the sun for 15 minutes. So you can capture those nice sunsetting sets of a football game or baseball game, and you can get some really, really nice cinematic stuff with the nice glow on the guys' jerseys, the yellow tints, the orange hues, stuff like that. Um, Now, you can't always plan for that because you're outdoors and it's tricky. But if you can pull off one or two shots for that, it will definitely enhance your video. It will definitely look cinematic for sure.
So, bottom line, if you don't know it already, I strongly suggest that you learn the technique called the exposure triangle so that you properly know and understand the relationship between shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, and then go from there. But also, like when you're talking about like shots that have the sun, like when a shot is backlit with the sun behind the subject, like it's also recognizing what to expose for. Like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes in a shot like that, maybe it's normal to not to have the subject's face look kind of dark if it works with the background sort of looking proper, and we understand that the sun's behind and there's a flare or a glare or something going on, and that's what we're looking at that looks like super cinematic, and the player being a bit of in the shade is kind of normal. And that's, to be honest, that's where a higher end camera makes a big difference, because if you got like a budget camera that doesn't have a very great dynamic range, you're probably going to lose the entire face. Where if you've got like an FX3, for example, the player might be darker, but you'll still be able to kind of see details and stuff. Where, and that's that dynamic range. The ability of the camera to have like 15 stops of dynamic range allows it to be able to manage the dark shadows and the bright highlights simultaneously, where cheaper cameras will probably struggle to do that. You know what I mean? But but yeah, I think that otherwise the next steps are, like for me, it's like filming angles and composition as well. So like filming angles, um, to me, I really like, and for cinematic shots, more often than not, you kind of want a low angle because it makes the players look bigger, look more like gladiators. They look, just more um, almost scarier, I'd say. So yeah, it just makes people look better. And it gives you as well, like if you get the crowd in the background that way, or you get more the sky, the lights, even like a night game, you can get the lights and get that effect that you were talking about earlier with the sun. So things like that. But it's also, again, like anything else, it's about variety. Like you don't want all your shots to be exactly the same, because if they're all the same, then then yeah, it becomes less cinematic in a way. But yeah, that low angle, but also just different. It's always cool as well to have. You don't necessarily need to rack focus, but to have something in the foreground that's kind of out of focus, and then you get your like. I like to sometimes just go in the crowd and have like a fan's shoulder in the foreground, and then I'm looking at the action on the field, so it kind of looks like I'm a fan watching the game. Things like that will be maybe on the player's bench, or sometimes it's just like a Gatorade bottle that's sort of just like on the edge of my frame, and then the action is behind it, like things like that, just to play with different focal lengths and have that sort of action going. And so that was composition, but no, that was shooting angle, sorry. And then composition is, yeah, trying to make it, like, if you can, it's always hard, especially during the game, but I like, it's always nice to have a shot that looks like symmetrical. So like having, if you got the player in the middle, that's more like for like when the players are coming out, or when during warm-ups and stuff, where you have actually time to film them, where they're not going anywhere, or you know exactly where they're going. Like, let's say you can line up your camera with the players coming out of a tunnel, then make sure that shot is symmetrical, where the tunnel's in the middle, and there's if there's like something on each side, that they're both like, same spot, everything works. You got a light on each side, for example, like just make it all look sort of tight and clean and perfect. And then you lock your camera like that, and you let the players go through the frame. That is a chef kiss. You know what I mean?
There you go.
What about you?
Actually, I was going to talk about having stuff in your foreground, but you took all the good material already. But no, having stuff in your
I want the Instagram clips. I'm
that's it.
shooting
That's
all
it. He's like, I'm taking it all. No, but having stuff in your foreground really makes it look cinematic, I find, especially when you do like a nice pan or a dolly, and you have that image, and it's passing through, and that I find that really really works. Um, but I think when you're doing cinematic stuff, especially for angles, I think it's a great time to use your gimbal. Now, I know you want to just do handheld because you don't want a lot of gear, but tunnel shots for videos are amazing with a gimbal, especially when depending how the light, if you can get behind the players and they're coming into the light, so your camera's starting off dark, and as you're moving forward, it's getting brighter and brighter. Obviously, you have to expose for that light ahead of time. But those shots look great when players are running out onto the field or onto the ice, and you're following behind with the gimbal, and you slow it down. Like, it's perfect. And especially if you can come out from behind a wall, so that's your foreground image, the wall, and then you come and you see the players, and then you follow them. Like, it looks really really good. I already mentioned establishing shots of arenas and stuff, but inside, like, I love gimbal shots for locker rooms, entrances, trophies, plaques, sayings, all those things that you might not need at every video. Okay. But when you have the chance to film that stuff and you have the proper equipment, film it, put it in your bank, because you're going to need it later on. Because they're always great transition shots too, I find, that you can use in between action, or to kind of change the pace a bit, or back up when you want to tell a longer story. You have those shots. So when you have the chance, I would definitely film all those. It's tricky to get creative angles, right? Like, your first couple times doing this, you're not sure what works and what doesn't work. As you become more of a veteran, you know that the low angle is so powerful. Like how you said, how it makes guys look bigger and stronger in that. Like, I feel like the low angle is underutilized, because we see sports highlights and they're all at like waist level. Whether it's football or hockey, baseball, we're so used to broadcast stuff. And then even when we show up with our Sonys and that, we're all shooting from that same level. And yeah, it looks a little different because of the shallow depth of field. But when you have the time to get a low angle of players walking by you, and you watch it later on your computer, you're like, wow, this is a great shot. Because you usually have lights coming from up top. So, if you put a little mist filter on it, it's going to be a little softer. Now, I find filters help too, to help kind of give it more of a feeling. I wasn't a big filter guy before, But now I love my mist filter just because it makes me look so good on this podcast. So I'm like, you know what? It must work, right?
Oh, is that what it is?
That's
I
what
thought
it
you
is.
were
That's what
wearing
it is.
makeup.
No. My makeup artist couldn't make it today, so I had to go with the mist filter. No, but when when you have a mist filter and the lights are coming in, especially like over the shoulders on players and that, it really looks good, and it's something that's different. And that's the idea of cinematic shots, is giving people a different shot that are not expecting, something that catches their eye. Because, you know, whether a guy's scoring a touchdown, hitting a home run, or scoring a goal, we've seen it from all the angles before. But when you give someone a different angle in a highlight tape or a reel, they're like, whoa, what was that? Like, oh, okay, it looks good. You can see that they put the time into it. So that's the idea. What other angle do I really like? Actually, one cinematic shot that I like, well, it's not so cinematic, but I like having a guy put his back to my camera, and then when he pulls away, I'll mess with the timing, so I can speed ramp it or slow it down to open up, you know. And when you use it properly with a bit of movement, I usually do the movement in keyframing though, not on my camera, because it's a little trickier. Because I'm trying to make sure that he stays in focus in that. I find that's a cool cinematic shot, and it's great transition because you can cut to black and then you pop back out and he's moving away from the camera. Especially when I speed ramp the
So you're talking
beginning.
about like starting like real close, where you're seeing pretty much black, and as he's moving away, then he
Exactly.
reveals himself. Okay.
Yeah. So I put a little speed ramp at the beginning of the black just to get to the light faster, and then I'll slow him down. And I find that works. Maybe it's a little off topic for angles, but I guess it's an angle, but it's more of a shot idea.
Yeah.
You know, but you're always trying stuff, and that's the point of cinematic stuff. Like, there's times where I try cinematic shots and I look at them later on my computer. I'm like, oh my God, no, it didn't work. Or I don't like it, you know, or it doesn't go with this video. But the more times you practice it, the better you're going to get.
To me as well, like when it comes to action, because most of the stuff we've been talking about, well, other than the low angle, it's more like establishing shots or, you know, beauty shots, things like that. But like during the action itself, I find either, for me, it's like either like extreme close-ups or super wide. Like it you know, the middle, you can use it, but like if you want something that looks like cinematic, I like having like a very wide and if I'm like super wide, I probably won't move much. I like the action, like let's say a quarterback sort of drawing back, and then you see the ball like sort of go through the frame, and I'm staying there, where or I'm sort of staying on the kicker, and then he comes into the frame, kicks the ball, starts running, and it's just like going from one end to my frame. I haven't moved at all. Or the other way around, where I'm like super tight and I'm following them, like I'm following the running back, I'm following the ball and trying to, you know, catch the catch actually with my camera, you know, up close and getting all those emotions, like make sure I keep recording after a play to see if there's like some celebration or reaction of some sort, you know, catch all these emotions and like extreme close-ups. And to me, these are the two type of shots that I'm doing. Like either I'm super wide and I'm not moving much, or I'm extreme close up and I'm following everything.
One of the cinematic shots of my favorite shots that you did recently, when you were testing a gimbal, not too long ago, you did a basketball video. You're testing a gimbal. You did like a dolly shot where the guy's dribbling the ball, and you're following him with the gimbal, and you slowed it down, and you had a mist filter on. Like that's a cinematic shot, and you used it perfectly. Your video was a more slow motion paced anyway because you were using gimbal. But for me, that shot really stuck out. And I know you like we had spoke off podcast and you were like, oh, I shouldn't have used the mist filter. But on that shot, that mist filter is what I found makes it. Like, yes, the movement's good, and you're kind of, your camera's following the ball, so he's not fully
it's kind
centered.
Of a reverse compliment. Like you started giving me props about my shot, and then turns out it's just a filter.
No. I'm talking about the composition now. The filter's good. No, but you didn't like it. I liked it. All right. I just told everybody how much I like a mist filter.
All right, but the filter.
No, your motion in the shot was perfect. Okay, how's that? And the color grading was spot on. Do you have a LUT pack that you use for that?
No, don't try to make up for it. Sorry, you said what you said.
That's it. That's it. I'm gonna get slammed down in the comments. No, so back to that shot. I really liked the pacing of it because you're following the guy,
Hmm.
and you had people in the foreground, like you had the front row, you're following behind it. But what made it stand out, it was a different shot. You're not expecting that shot because
Yeah,
you were cutting from guys making baskets, defensive plays, dunks, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're just following a guy up the court.
yeah,
9 out of 10 times, you're not going to film that shot of a guy just dribbling up the court, not really doing any action. But the way you used it and the way it looks cinematic really, really stuck out for me. So if I go back to the video, that's the one shot that I remember the most.
yeah. No, I totally agree, and that was my favorite shot as well. Because like for all the reasons that you said, like where there's people in the foreground, and he sort of reveals himself in the frame, and I'm following him, and I'm going at the same pace as he is, so we're kind of moving together. And that shot, like you said, is very rare. First of all, because it's not necessarily like someone bringing up the ball is not necessarily something that you'll shoot or put in the video very often. But that perspective is even more rare because it's not every arena that you have the actual that you actually have the room to do this. Because for me to be able to, I wasn't on the sideline. It's not like I'm moving on the sideline next to him. Like there's the crowd, and then behind the crowd there was sort of a, the what do you call it, like just a corridor or whatever, like where I was, there was space, there was no one there, and I could walk there pretty fast because he's not taking his time. Like, so I'm walking, I'm speed walking basically in that place. So yeah, it's not everywhere that you have the room and the space to do a shot like that. And I saw it and I took it, and it worked out all right.
That shot made me feel like I was there. That's why I like that shot. The way it's moving, it's like I was you had 3 rows of crowd in front of you. Seeing that angle, it felt like I was in the 4th row,
Yeah.
the way that you did it. So it worked out good. Now, did you plan that shot, or while you were there, I know you were testing a gimbal and you had other stuff on your mind. Was that just a shot that presented itself, or during warm up in that, where you're like, oh, I'm going to try to maybe walk up and down the court a couple times?
No, definitely not during warm up, but I think because I had the gimbal and I was trying to make obviously as many shots that would make sense with a gimbal, and I saw that, like I said, I had the space to do that, and then I thought, like, yeah, let's do it. I practiced like the shot you see is the best one, but obviously I did it probably, I don't know, not that many times, probably 3 times. One was probably out of focus. The other one, maybe I was shaking a bit too much, and that was sort of the best out of 3. But yeah, it was just an idea of like, oh yeah, I've got the space to do it. This could be cool, and it's a different way of tracking the action than just being on the baseline and trying to track the basketball as people are shooting. So I went for it, and yeah, I would definitely do it again if I was shooting in that arena. Because what allows it to happen is that because that arena is mostly for ice hockey, so they don't take out the boards. They take out the glass, but the board is still there. So there's that
Oh.
space between the board and the seats, or maybe it was behind the board. I can't remember. But yeah, there's that space there that no one's there. So it was easy to just sort of walk along that and not run into anyone, even if I'm not looking in front of me.
One of my favorite cinematic shots that I do with a gimbal at hockey that I love is you come from the player locker room, which is a darker alley, and you come up to the exposed glass. Sorry, I said it in French. Ice. See, I do speak French, guys. It's not just the
True.
goes exposed ice, and I love that, especially when you speed ramp a little bit, so you come out the tunnel a little faster, and then as soon as you hit the ice, you slow it down. And I also like, you know, back to hockey, showing all the banners. So when
Yeah.
you do that nice
Oh,
pan of all the banners in slow mo, like for me, that gets me
to
every
have
time.
banners.
Yeah, well, the Montreal Canadiens have the most, so we got a lot
Yeah.
of banners. It's hard because you got to shoot both sides because we got so many banners. But I would
It's
use
hard.
that in any hockey video I edited, just because that is my favorite shot. The entrance to the ice, not glass, the ice, and the banners. That's my go to in my edits. I love that. I love those shots. Um, but The way that you followed it, I would love to be able to do that in hockey. But there's no way
Yeah.
to walk around like that.
No,
And it's too
no,
fast. It's too fast. Like the guy
no,
was kind of bringing up the ball a little slower, like he wasn't running full speed.
no,
Because it would have been hilarious to see you running full speed on the side trying to catch the guy.
yeah. No, I wasn't running. Well, I was definitely speed walking though. Like he's still like, because yeah, I didn't want to have his back to me. Like I wanted to make sure that I was keeping up with him. So definitely need a gimbal for that shot. Like I wouldn't be able to like handheld. It would have been way too shaky. So yeah, so let's talk like post production. What are you doing in post to make your shots more cinematic?
First of all, I'm getting rid of all my shakes. So having stable footage, even if there's movement with my camera or I'm doing movement handheld, I'm making sure there's no shakes. So lazy me will try warp stabilizer.
Oh yeah,
But I will go in the settings and put it active, like so it's a little stronger. It takes a little bit longer to render. I'll try that. Um, I'll also, slow down the clip if I have to. But ideally, I'm shooting in 24 to get that cinematic look, so I'd have to use warp stabilizer or a third-party software like Catalyst Browse.
mm,
I really, really like Catalyst Browse. I don't have the paid version. Do you have the paid version?
no.
No, I have the free version. It works really, really good. The only issue I do have with Catalyst Browse is if you don't adjust the settings yourself, it really, really crops in, I find.
Oh yeah. I think by default it goes to like 50% or something.
Yeah. But the first time you use it, you're not thinking that, right? Like
Yeah.
I've been using it for a couple of years. So now I know my settings are there. I go to my settings. I do like maybe max I do is like a 10% crop.
And I think the only difference, I could be wrong, but I think the only difference between the free and the paid version is that the free version doesn't export in 10-bit. So if you put in your clip and then export a stabilized version, then it becomes an 8-bit clip. So then if you try to color correct it, color grade, all that, then you lose, all the extra data that the 10-bit file had to begin with.
You can also batch batch export in the paid version,
Oh,
where the
okay.
free version you have to go clip by clip.
One by one. Okay.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but does it export 120? I don't believe it does.
I don't
Or at
know.
least it used to not. I haven't filmed in 120 in a while. As the listeners know, I'm a 60 kind of guy. But I believe it used to not do 120.
Well, I think the problem is that there's no gyro data in the 120 clips.
Oh, that's probably why.
Because I think, yeah, they just can't be stabilized. Well, they can, like with a warp stabilizer or something like that, but you can't use the gyro data to do it. That's the issue. Yeah.
And the issue too with like warp stabilizer, okay, you get those weird lines sometimes. And you're like,
Yeah.
what is that? So that's when you got to stick away from warp stabilizer. And you can't use warp stabilizer if you slow down the clip.
Yeah. Well, you have to nest it.
You have to nest it and you have to do an extra step, But the first time you're doing this and you see that message pop out, you don't understand why it's not working. You're like, well, what's going on here? How come it won't just make my clip smooth?
Yeah. And if you have like clips that are, more than 4K, let's say you're filming with a GoPro and like 5.6K or things like that, then it becomes sometimes that's when you can get Premiere to crash or something because it's becoming a bit too much for the warp stabilizer to handle and it's freaking out.
Warp stabilizer is finicky. Like sometimes you'll drop it on a clip and boom, it does it right away and it looks good. And then other times it's got to analyze the second analyze. You got to go into your effects tab, press analyze and wait. And then you get those wavy lines because there's too much movement. It almost looks like a shutter roll. Sometimes I feel like.
Yeah, the wobble. Yeah.
I use it when I'm lazy. I'm sorry, guys. There are times where we're lazy, right? Because we want to work smarter. We want to work faster. So that's where the warp stabilizer.
Well, I think it's what everybody does is that you start with a warp stabilizer, you put it on, see if it looks good, and if it doesn't, then you go to Catalyst Browse.
Exactly. There are ways to do it in After Effects that really work well. I just don't do them because I'm not that good in After Effects yet. I will be though soon. I will be soon after I take CM's course there. My After Effects skills will be through the roof. Big shout out to him. Thank you for hooking us up. A little plug there, but yeah, once my After Effects is up to par, then maybe I'll start stabilizing my stuff in After Effects. Once my footage is stable, Then it's all about my look. Like I'm making sure my colors look good. I'm trying to give that video a certain look with my LUTs. My color correction should be spot on. Sorry, my color should be spot on because I exposed properly. Um, so my shot should be ready. But I feel like color correcting and adding LUTs and that really makes the image pop. What about you?
Yeah, well, a bit like you, like yeah, I like everything to be well. I was gonna say stabilized, but like if it's a again, like if I'm going extreme close-ups, I'm following the action, it's moving around. A little bit of shake is natural, and even on my establishing shots, to be honest, I like that feel, like that documentary feel, basically where everything feels like it's handheld and it's natural, and there's a little bit of shake, but yeah, a natural shake, not something that's
Not an
jittery or
earthquake.
just jumping or yeah, or too much. So a bit of shake doesn't bother me that much, and especially that I film with like a camera that has IBIS, and depending on if I'm using my 70 to 200 mil, that's got stabilization as well. If I'm filming basketball with a wider lens, my wider lenses don't have stabilization, but they're a bit wider, so they're easier to manage. So yeah, and I'm you know I'm starting with a bit of help as well, so a little bit of shake from that perspective is not that bad. But otherwise in post, I like to I like, well, like you said, color grade is a big part of it, trying to give it a look, but it doesn't have to be a crazy overly cinematic look with all these orange and teal or like all these different things, or adding like film filters, and it can just be natural, like as long as it's been shot and exposed properly. It's just to have a similar, that the look you have is just like all the way the same the entire time you're great, like just that your shots, you can't have a shot that looks a bit underexposed and then the next one it looks like the sun came out, and then one's a bit bluey, then the next one's a bit yellow, like just make sure that everything sort of is consistent. That's the word I was looking for. Like just be really consistent with your look. And otherwise, yeah, for me, then it becomes more about using the right music, definitely using sound effects to just accentuate some movement, some feelings, like whether it's like a whoosh at some time to just accentuate like the action and stuff, or it's just like when the if I have an extreme close up of a ball going through a net, I definitely want to hear that net. I mean, if the net's far away, it's a 3 point shot like on a wider shot, maybe I don't really need it, because if I'm sitting back and I'm looking at a basket from far away, I'm not hearing it. But if I'm so close that it's in my face, I definitely need to hear it. So it's making a sound design that makes sense to the perspective of the shot, so that everything feels natural and, like you were saying, as if I was there. And then the music is a big part, because cinematic is all about the emotions that you're bringing out in people. So like you want the music that brings out the emotion that you want, and you want to edit that footage in a way that fits that music. So if you got a bit of an emotional build up, then you got all these establishing shots and beauty shots that are just, they're not action packed all the time. They're just like, they're exactly, they're beauty shot to sort of make you feel a certain way, to build up a certain thing. Maybe it's, it starts slow and emotional, and it's just the trainer like putting, I don't know, the socks and the jerseys in the locker room, and then you get the players walking in, and then you get them like taping and things like that, and it just sort of builds up into a game. So it's about using the right music that makes the shot look dramatic, because if you got like intense hip hop and someone's putting up jerseys in the lockers, it's like it's not that cinematic. So using the right music, taking your time to pick the right track is very important.
The music is key. Like you can make ordinary things look exciting. Like hanging a jersey on a hanger and putting it in someone's locker. You're like, oh, that's not a big deal. But if you have the right beat and you have a nice angle of it and the lighting's good, yeah, that's a cinematic shot. And it gives you a feeling. And like we start off the show saying that cinematic shots give you a feeling. And it's tricky to give your video emotion. And that's something that takes a lot of time. And it's part of storytelling because that image is telling a story. You know, that guy tying his skates, or I'm talking about hockey because that's what I'm most familiar with, sharpening his skates. You know, we used to always film the skate sharpening in slow motion. So you see those sparks, you know, and we throw that in a video and everyone would always be like, wow, because you could feel it. You could feel like the guy's getting ready. And you want people to feel goosebumps when they see those cinematic shots. And the music and the sound effects are going to get you there. Now, it's tricky to find a good song that gives that emotion. And that's where editing, being a good editor comes in handy because you want to move from action to the emotional part. Now, sometimes some cinematic shots could be like player shots where you're doing, your players on a green screen, stuff like that. You're shooting in 24 frames. You have a background behind them. You can always slow that down too and use that as a cinematic shot where a guy turns and you have the lighting properly done where, say, it's only lighting half his face or a backlit name. Stuff like that can be used also for cinematic shots, and they're great segues in your edit. Now, we touched on a little bit about the lighting, but lighting interviews, lighting players, um, there's a way to make it cinematic, and it comes with practice because not everybody's going to want a half lit face, right? Or just the name and not the whole jersey lit up and that. So you have to, you know, film with a bit of caution and know when you can do that stuff and when you can use that stuff. Like you worked in pro sports for a long time, you know those shots are home runs, but you're not using them all the time. You have a bank of them and you pull them out when you really need them.
Well, it's about like as well that usually if you're working for a team at the start of the season, you'll have these conversations about what type of look you want and for the season content and stuff, and then you'll film those hero shots and headshots and stuff like in a way that then you'll be able to use throughout the season with your marketing content and your opening videos and all that sort of stuff.
What about you for emotion? Like for me, whenever we do our opening video, the first time I see it, I feel emotion. When we're in playoffs, that's when I feel the most emotion, right? Because like you're excited for the game, you're using a lot of those cinematic shots. When else can teams or videographers capitalize on those moments? It's a
Well,
tough question, eh? It's a tough question. I
yeah.
know. I see you thinking like, oh man, this wasn't on the list.
No, but I'm wondering, like, do you mean as in what type of shots or what type of videos?
What type of videos? What type of videos? Because like when you work for a team, it's easy to know which ones are emotional. You know which ones you want to get your team hyped up for. But
Uh,
for regular editors who are out there and they're trying stuff, it's like how do you come up with that story where you're like, okay, I want to do an emotional reel today. I want to show more slow motion because like I'll go back to your basketball video where you did mostly slow motion. It stands out for me because it was so different than your other stuff. Your other basketball stuff are quick shots, quick swishes, where that one stood out for me because you took more time.
well, ideally, like my answer would be like every video has a bit of a story and definitely an emotional component to it. Like it's not always easy to, but to me, yeah, even if it's just a highlight reel, that's why I always like fight less today, but like especially in the beginning when I was starting my business in Australia, like people just wanted to see, and even the Canadians, it was like all you could show in a video was highlights of the home team. Like you couldn't show anything negative. Like no, if I put something negative in a video, they would automatically ask me to take it out. And it was all about the positives and it was all about upbeat music, nothing too slow, nothing is a, and I was like, how can you appreciate the highs if you don't show the lows? Like you need both. I'm obviously going to show way more highs than lows, but it's always good to have a bit of a lowdown, like oh, we get scored on, we look depressed or like sad or whatever, and then boom, the music ramps back up, and then we start scoring again, and then we win. Like that's to me, that's an important part of a video, no matter what type of video I'm doing. So I don't always get to do it. Like depends, obviously, if you're doing like a 15, 20 seconds video, it's becoming a lot harder to do that. But yeah, I definitely like to put emotions and sometimes even in a 15-second video, like it's just showing faces. Like that's what I meant earlier by making sure you keep recording after a good play and just stay with the player that just did it, because you never know what type of reaction, and even if it's a bad play, like what type of reaction you're going to get. And that reaction, maybe you're not using it with that play, maybe the play wasn't good enough to make the video, but the reaction, you can always use it as a cutaway somewhere somehow, and that's going to get you that emotion. So it's easy with players faces, close-ups and stuff, to just pour in emotional stuff in any type of video.
Actually, you just made me think of something. So I saw on Instagram last week, they shared, it's an emotional video. It's all of the Edmonton Oilers sitting in their locker room
Oh
while
yeah,
they're
well,
announcing Connor McDavid winning this Conn Smythe, but he's sitting in the locker room with his teammates who just lost the Stanley Cup. And that's an emotional video, and it's actually cinematic too, because it's all close-ups like what you're talking about. But when you think about the scheme of things, nothing's going on in that video. They're just going from guy to guy looking sad, and you hear the audio in the distant background, and it reminds me of when guys fail in sports and you have a guy leaned over and his teammates picking him back up by putting his hand on his back, stuff like that. Those become cinematic shots if used in the right context. So yeah, I started shooting a lot after plays, and I feel like I get some of the best shots from those moments. Players interacting, talking when setting up on a face-off, high fiving or little bumps of acknowledgement, encouragement, talking, positioning, stuff like that.
mm-hmm.
There is one thing we did forget though about cinematic shots that I
Oh.
feel is important. That you're like, I don't have one, so it's not important to me. Drone shots.
Well, they make great establishing shots,
Great
that's for sure.
establishing shots to the right music. You could speed it up, you could slow it down. Uh, it's very, very handy to have. Obviously, though, you're only using it for outside stuff or tracking people walking, running. Most of the time, you can't really do flybys during a game unless you have special permission, because from the team or from aviation, because a
Mm.
lot of times that area is blocked off. And action cams. I know a GoPro probably isn't the greatest quality. Well, actually, they've come a long way. Like my 4K GoPro, I have the 11. Like the image is sweet in that, but you could do creative cinematic shots with it. So I saw one recently where a guy, he puts it inside the football cage and he walks up the tunnel and they do it in slow motion and they have like lighting and all that on.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, like with the action cams, like it has to be from like a perspective that you
A
would
different
never get.
perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
from any other camera.
Or you have the guys where they open up, like you have the guy at training camp and he throws down his bag, and when he opens it
Yeah.
up, he's wearing his jersey and stuff. So you can use these other cameras. It's just you have to find creative ways to make it cinematic. And that's where it's all about thinking. It's not so much about the camera, because these are just point and shoot cameras, basically, right?
It's about the angle and the perspective.
Exactly. But they allow you to get angles that you would normally not get if I was holding my Sony. I can't get into that bag. No
Yeah.
matter how hard I tried, I can't get into that bag. I can lie down on the floor and pretend I'm a bag, but I put that action camera as a lot easier. Or
Yeah.
I did a gym video and guys are jumping over ropes, and I put the GoPro right where they're jumping over, and I use that shot a couple times because it's a different perspective. And especially when you slow it down, you have lights from above. You can get filters too. You can get ND filters. You can get mist filters for your GoPros, for your drones. Like I
Yeah.
always fly my drone with an ND filter.
Smart.
Especially in daylight, because it gives me the cleanest shot. You just have to be creative, and you can come up with so many cinematic shots with these little cameras. You have to plan them out ahead of time. These shots, they don't just happen in front of you.
Yeah, no, exactly. And usually you need permission as well. Because if I'm thinking GoPro, like, I don't know, I'm thinking like putting it inside a soccer goal, for example. But like, obviously, you need to make sure that you won't get. You need the permission of I don't know, the referees or the league or someone to just put a camera inside the net. But same thing with hockey, golf. I'm thinking literally inside the hole, so that as the ball drops in, it drops on the camera. Like swimming, you could actually put in the water. Like you want those angles that a normal camera wouldn't get. But like you said, it's something that you set up in advance and that you need permission and all that stuff.
Actually, it's funny. I'll share a little story. So I filmed these kids swimming the other day, and I thought it'd be a great idea to put my GoPro in the water with them. All it turned out was footage of kids fighting over who gets to do selfies with the camera. I got nothing cinematic out of that footage. So what I did is I kind of did like a takeover video where the kids just take over the camera, and it's a lot of kids underwater doing peace signs and yelling and smiling. And it's a fun video, but it didn't turn out the way that I thought it would be.
Was it just set like attached to the wall or something? Or
No, I have a floating handle. So I handed it off to them because I want to try and get them swimming with it, because it was like swimming lessons and stuff like that. Yeah, it didn't work out.
So I was gonna say, if they're doing like actual, like swimming, like in their own lanes and stuff, like you could have it on the selfie stick and just have the stick in the water and sort of do that basketball shot that you like so much.
I did try some stuff like that
in the water and follow them.
But once they saw the handle, they're like, "Oh, can we try?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I threw it in. I tried to get a shot where I threw it in and it pops in, and then it was just chaos from then on. So that was not a smart idea on my part. I do use my GoPro a lot though for time lapse. I like the GoPro for time lapse because it's easier than using my Sony on the shutter. So I figured why put extra shutter counts on my Sony when I could just use the GoPro. I could leave it there. I don't have to worry about rain, wind, sand, any of that stuff.
Yeah, well, that depends how long you want to make that time lapse. But I usually just use the S&Q mode. I just like my S&Q mode is set for one frame, and I'll just go to S&Q mode but I don't do like time lapses that go for hours. Like I'll do like 5 minutes.
Time lapses could be cinematic too. Like I've done a lot of like travel stuff, say, where I do like sunsets, sunrises, stuff like that to the right beat. Especially with a filter on it, a little mist filter on it, you get like some extra softness around the sun. It looks really, really cinematic. So you can use those action cams too for cinematic stuff. Yeah. It's just, you got to plan it out. You got to be creative.
Should we move on to like a Q&A soon? Because I feel like my neighbor's about to the construction site's about to turn on soon.
All right. Yeah, because E's house is still under construction, guys, and it's been a pain in the butt to edit.
Yes, we've made the most of their lunch break.
But I think we covered pretty much everything on how to get a cinematic shot. And if you guys have more questions, reach out. We'll answer them. I mean, we're not all our stuff is so cinematic too, but you got to try. You got to plan out your shots and try. Now, I do have a question from Robbie Snooks. It was on episode 18 on how to charge. Sorry, I only saw this 9 days later. I didn't realize that you can comment on Spotify. That's my bad. All right.
Come on.
What do you do about a long-term client that don't budget on rates, one that has been paying same amount every year and doesn't want to pay more? Obviously, he writes, the easy answer is to drop them. But I have a few freelancer guys that rely on the work. My only solution so far is to tell them they get a 3-cam production instead of 4. Either way, my profit stays the same. They are part of the highest level of junior football in Canada, but they don't know how to budget properly or to take advice on how to sponsor elements of the broadcast. So what advice would you give Robbie Snooks?
Well, I think he's going at it the right way in the sense that maybe sounds like he's giving them like a product that includes like a 4-camera shoot. So, and it's normal if he's been doing it for years for his prices to go up at some point, because his freelancers are probably charging it more now than they were 2 years ago or whatever. So if they can't pay, then he has to just offer less for the same price. So offering a 3-camera shoot, or if he was doing several edits, maybe they take one out, whatever it is that they both sort of agree on. But I would try to take some stuff out. But in a way, you kind of hope, like, you definitely want to give a client like a good product, but in a way you kind of hope that taking a camera out is going to make it, they're going to see the difference, notice it, and be like, oh, it was so much better before, and then for that reason find the money and then pay you more. But you don't want to sabotage the whole thing either, so be careful with that.
Yeah, because it seems like they're a good client. The issue is you have to show them your value. You have to show them what they're actually getting at. And that's what's tough about video, because you have to show them like people are watching, it's helping build their brand, it's promoting them, it's getting it's awareness. And your video does all that, but they don't see that. They're just looking at the price. So it's whether you show them like, look how many views you're getting on Instagram, look how many people are engaged in the comments. You have to figure out a way to show them the value of your services, and then price isn't an issue. And you can say no sometimes. So I agree, taking stuff away and spending a little less time on it is an easy way to save money. But if you say no to them also sometimes, not all the time, sometimes if they have more than one shoot a year and some shoots just don't fit your budget, tell them like, listen, I can't do it for that price. I'm really sorry. And they're going to have a hard time finding someone else to make that price too.
Or they'll find someone that won't be as good.
Exactly. But when you first start out, it's really hard. I remember saying yes to everything because I was like gun ho and I got to do it. I got to do it. And once I started saying no, I found clients started to value me a little bit more because they realized I was busy. I was doing other projects. They're not the only person I'm relying on. But it's hard to say no. But once you say it once, it becomes easier the second time, the third time. And you can get that higher price point because you're providing them the value.
And it's also when you got more clients, it's easier to say no, because if you lose one, it's not like you're using 60% of your income. So sometimes it's like if you're in a position where you can manage to lose a client, then don't be afraid to say no, because it happened to me a few times in the past where if I'm charging too much, then they'll they'll want me to come down. I'll say no, and then they'll find someone else. And then a year later, after that one season that they've done with that new supplier, they'll come back to me because they're like, you know what? Never again. We're not going through another year of that mess that was that season with these cheaper guys. Let's just find the budget and do it right. And then they get back to me.
It's a great example. I was in the same boat. I had one client, I had them on a retainer deal. They were my biggest client. The retainer deal ended. I assumed we were going to continue because they were very, very happy with stuff. Their budgets got cut. Not that they didn't like the service, not that they didn't like what I was going on. Their budgets got cut. 6 months later, they came back because guess what? They recognized the value that I was adding to their brand, all the exposure they were getting and all that. And then we were back on. Now, it hurt losing that big client, but I found other clients to replace them. They weren't as, they were smaller projects and stuff. So, instead of having the one big client, I got two smaller ones, and it made up, and it was about the same time. But it is tough losing clients, but you got to know your value and you got to show them the value that you're bringing to them. And it's tough. I get it, but you have to know what your limit is and draw that line.
But any business manager or financial advisor will tell you you need several clients anyway. Like in a way, you'd rather have like for your work, resources and time and all that. Like you're probably much more comfortable with one big client. But from a financial perspective, you're much better to have several clients that are making you a little bit less money, because you're always eventually going to lose a client. So if you lose one, if losing a client affects like your income by 40, 50, 60%, this is not a viable business. Like you need to be able to survive even if you lose a client or two. So to have, a bunch of clients, so my point is, if you're gonna, if losing that big client allowed you to gain two or three other small ones because you had the time, then it's probably a good thing anyway.
Exactly. It's just when you do lose that client or you're struggling with a client, it's not fun. First of all, it hurts your ego a bit, it hurts your bank account a bit. And you're giving them 100%. And you're like, well, why aren't they giving me back 100%? But in business, it doesn't always work like that. So I'd play a little hardball, Robbie, and show them the value that you're giving them.
Good luck.
All right. So that's it for today's episode? Yes? You're just like, yes, that's it. Play hardball. Done.
Exactly.
Charge more. Robbie, charge them more, buddy. Just tell them I just upped it $1,000.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that is it for this episode of Game Day Glare. Hopefully we helped you guys understand a little bit more on how to get some cinematic shots. See
See you
ya.
guys.